Okay, we are in the sixth constant Mitzvot, and we're on page 166, day 31. It says, secular people may fear subconsciously that impartial examination of the evidence will result in positive proof of the existence of a creator, which would mean that there must be a purpose to life, and that the world is not a free-for-all. Since the author puts this very nicely. Because if one, who is it? Rabbi Berkowitz. Rabbi Berkowitz puts this very nicely. If a person, as long as a person can deny God and say that we're all just a mistake, then there's no purpose to life. There's no purpose to life whatsoever. We live and we should make the best of it, but there's really no purpose. I was a mistake. Okay, that's it. But here, if they look at, and that's his point, if they see some positive proof of the existence of the Creator, they wouldn't like it, because that would mean that there is a purpose to life. And what's the purpose to life? So then, since the creation of a Creator will require them to change their lifestyles, their study of nature is distorted by their determination to find proof for the prior beliefs. No matter how convincing the evidence is, they will always find reason to argue or ignore it. Usually they ignore it, they don't argue it. For religious Jews too, there is much to fear. Many of us are ready to focus on God to the extent that it does not restrict us too much. But we have our limits. When we find something that that seems to threaten the comfort of our existence, we make sure not to focus on it too intently. And even if we do allow ourselves to study such information on an intellectual level, sometimes it is not our eyes that are being blocked, but our heart. We cannot find it within ourselves to make the emotional change that is necessary. So he's hitting up on the frum people too. Okay, so we learn a lot, and yet sometimes it's intellectually stimulating, but it doesn't get through to our heart, and we don't change. And that's why Nachmanides, in his letter to his son, he says every time you study, you should look and to see if there's any way you can apply that to your life. In other words, make it real. It shouldn't just be an intellectual study. And this is what we were talking about actually last night in Derech Hashem, that he was also picking on when people only learn it intellectually, that it doesn't do anything to the person. So success in Ahavas Hashem, love of Hashem, is dependent on open-mindedness. The first step to impartial investigation of nature and Torah is to recognize that the fear that prevents us from doing so is a fear of the unknown. We don't know that a life of closeness to Hashem will be painful and make us unhappy, but we are afraid that it might. That fear brings an inability to see the beauty of a life with Hashem. We get caught up in a track of circular reasoning. We are afraid that the restrictions imposed by a God-filled existence will make us unhappy, so we refrain from investigating how beautiful such a lifestyle is and how happy it will make us. I mean, if you think about Shabbos, the first time you keep a Shabbos, especially if you are alone, you're not doing it with anybody else, is probably one of the more miserable things you do. Because you have nobody to talk with, sing with, you're sitting at a table, you're all alone, so even if you're singing the whole Zemirot, that you've only spent a half hour, whatever it's going to be, and how much can you sleep? And then the telephone rings, you can't answer it, the light's off, or the heat's not working, whatever, and you feel like a prisoner. And then your friends want to come out, so they even ring your doorbell. Can you come out? Let's go running, let's go jogging, let's bike ride. No, I'm sorry, it's Shabbos. So that's why people don't want to do that. I'm talking about, newly religious. But even the ones who are religious, born religious, sometimes they see it as an imposition too, because everybody else is doing something. So that's what he's saying. When you get into this ability, when we don't know what the life of closeness is going to bring us, and because we think it could be painful, so many times we'll use reasoning not to do it. The Rishonim's approach to Avas Hashem is effective, but only for those who are able to remove these obstacles. We must learn to impartially examine each piece of information we learn and see where it leads us. We must not be afraid of seeing how beautiful life can be when we realize that we are not restricted. We should focus on what we realize is the true importance of life. We must be brave enough to embrace a life in which we don't feel any temptation to break the rules, because we are so clear about where we want to go and how we are going to get there. Now that our glasses are clean, we can re-examine nature, Torah, and the suffering, and see whether that affects us as they should. So he says, let us begin with nature. The factor that Rambam and the Torah seems to consider most likely to cause us to love Hashem, upon viewing a previously unseen aspect of nature, we are instinctively captivated by His beauty and perfection. The challenge is to associate it with Hashem and realize how the perfect harmony attests to the creation of a creator. That's like when you see a sunset, and everybody looks at sunset and says, what a beautiful sunset. Well, if I just say what a beautiful sunset, but I don't realize that Hashem is the divine painter of that sunset, I'm not going to get what I really need from that. Realize that no supercomputer or super anything could create even one aspect of nature spontaneously, let alone the countless number of magnificent creations that surround us. The most amazing innovations in science require raw materials that Hashem has provided. Human science cannot manufacture anything ex nihilo, from nothing. It's an impossibility. When we begin to notice the wisdom, caring, and understanding that is invested into each mountain, river, houseplant, and butterfly, we will undoubtedly be awestruck by Hashem's greatness. We need not take field trips in order to appreciate Hashem's amazing creation. The information that the average high school student is taught provides enough proof of the perfection and the wondrousness of nature. Furthermore, the advent of modern technology places us in a better position than ever to appreciate the astonishing wisdom of creation. The most important components of computers are drawn from nature. Taking it one step further, the human brain that was able to create the computer certainly was not created and cannot be recreated by humans. With a little bit of thought, this should lead us to the certainty of the existence of a creator. Indeed, scientists who spend their time delving deeper and deeper into the amazing depth and orderliness of creation should lead the world in proclaiming that there is a God. So, by the way, you always ask about the atheist, so here he gives you a story of an atheist. The aforementioned Dr. Francis S. Collins was a confirmed atheist until he opened his mind to the possibility of God and the evidence for a creator who made what science can only study and attempt to recreate. He began to realize that it took greater faith and a considerable amount of arrogance to be an atheist and to reject any evidence to the contrary. By the way, what the atheist would say about this guy is he sold out. Period. Okay. As a leader of the Human Genome Project, Dr. Collins led a team of more than 2,000 scientists from 6 countries. Together, he said, we determined all 3 billion letters of the human genome and produced our own DNA instruction book. It is hard to get your mind around how much information this is. Suppose we decide to take a little time this morning to read the letters of the human genome together, just to express our awe at God's creation. If we took turns reading and agreed to stick with it until we were all the way through, we would be here for 31 years. And you have all that information inside each of the 100 trillion cells of your body. It takes a lot of faith or denial to believe that random chance produced such order in the human body or in the order of the rest of the observable universe. That's apparently what he said. So, the deeper our knowledge and understanding of nature becomes, the more convinced we should be of the existence of a creator. But additionally, when we appreciate the breathtaking perfection and creation and link it with the Creator, we should feel a need to come close to Him and to love Him. So that's Ahavas Hashem. So a person who studies Torah superficially will not be awestruck by it, although he may find the task of understanding it quite overwhelming. If one's appreciation of Chumash is limited to short insights in the weekly Parsha, and Talmud is a study that he finds frustrating because its relevance is not always apparent, he will not come to love Hashem by studying Torah. So it's an interesting statement he's making. That if I learn Chumash, or I learn the weekly Parsha, or I come to a shir, whatever the case is going to be, if he didn't pick on shir, but I'll pick on the shir, or I start learning Talmud, but it's frustrating. So again, what's the purpose that I'm doing this for? If I'm doing it so I can have a closeness with Hashem, then it's going to have an impact. If I'm doing it just as an intellectual study, then it will not have the impact. And again, we were discussing this last night. When you study Chumash, work on finding the messages that are hidden in the seemingly insignificant details of each verse. Realize that each grammatical nuance and choice of phraseology contains information. There are valuable lessons to be gleaned from the Torah's descriptions, lessons that can provide practical solutions to problems we face. So here's an interesting story. On the subway in New York City, the punish of a Rav, Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Kahaneman, noticed a group of hoodlums glancing secretly in his direction. He sensed that they were about to attack him, and he was carrying a large sum of money that he had raised for his yeshiva. Thinking quickly, he took a note out of his pocket and approached the group. Pointing to an address that was written on the paper, he asked, "Can you please tell me how to get to this address?" Smiling slightly at the naivety of the elderly rabbi, the leader of the group said, "We'll do even better. We will take you there. Just get off at the next stop with us, and we'll show you where it is." When the doors of the train opened at the next station, the Rav made a sweeping gesture toward the door with his hand, honoring his escorts to exit first. After they stepped off onto the platform, the Rav readied himself as if he were about to step down. He delayed just long enough to allow the doors to begin sliding shut, and then he quickly retreated into the car, leaving the group of thugs stranded on the platform as the train pulled away with him inside it. Later, he told Rav Abba Grosbard, that he had devised his plan based on the verse in the Torah. Okay? In Parsha Vayishlach, after Yaakov made peace with Esav, the latter offered to travel together with him. So Yaakov preferred not to have the company of his wicked brother, but did not want to upset the fragile peace agreement that they had reached. "Let my Lord go ahead of his servant," he told Esav. "I will make my way at my slow pace according to the gate of the flock before me, and the gate of the children until I come to my Lord at Seir." In truth, said the punish of a Rav, Yaakov had no intention of traveling to Seir. He knew that living in close proximity to Esav would be dangerous both physically and spiritually. He avoided insulting Esav by telling him to go ahead, and that he, Yaakov, would catch up. I learned from this verse that when a Jew must remove himself from enemies who want to harm him, he can do so by pretending to go along with them, but moving at a slower pace and leaving them waiting for him. This is what I did on the train. So yeshiva students spend hours, even days or weeks, at times trying to understand the depth of a sugya, a Talmudic topic. The process requires mind-numbing concentration, and an approach will often be proven wrong after much time and mental energy was invested into developing it. But the absolute certainty that there is a truly perfect approach keeps them going. They try and try until they find the correct approach, and when they do, they experienced indescribable joy. So it says, it's a story, on a snowy, cold day in Yerushalayim, Rav David Finkel decided to visit the Brisker Rav, figuring that he would have plenty of time to spend with the Rav on the day when no one else would venture out to visit him. It was snowing. Wants to go out. As he reached the Brisker Rav street, he saw a lone figure dancing in the snow. Upon drawing near, he recognized the dancer as none other than Rav Shach. Rav Shach was not known to be a dancer. Okay. When he asked Rav Shach why he was dancing, the latter explained, the Brisker Rav's explanation of Torah concepts filled me with such joy that I want to dance each time I leave his house. I usually suppress my emotions. However, it's because I know that I usually suppress my emotions, however, because I know that passerby will consider it strange. But on a snowy day like today, I was sure nobody would be outside. So I allowed myself to rejoice in this manner. What we're getting from this whole story is he was really happy. On a similar note, Rav Shach once remarked that he did not understand why people felt drawn to material pleasures. He said, I just finished a Torah discussion with the Brisker Rav. I cannot think of anything more pleasurable than hearing his Torah thoughts. So again, it all depends on how I'm approaching Torah. If I approach Torah as an intellectual study, as something that, it's like any other thing, so then I'm not going to get the han'ah, the enjoyment that I would get from it. But if I see it as something that's beautiful, and that's from Hashem, and so on and so forth, connecting, so then I'm going to be overjoyed. So he says, once you begin to study Torah in depth, you will start to feel intense love for the one who gave it to the Jewish people. And once you begin to feel that love, you will develop a craving for more and more Torah knowledge. You will yearn to find more time to study Torah so that you can increase your appreciation of the one you are in love with. Torah study is therefore a clear indicator of where you stand in your efforts to build Ahavat Hashem, the love of Hashem. When studying ceases to be a chore and becomes a passion, you know you have become a true Ohev Hashem, a true lover of God. So again, that's something we all have to strive for, that we never view learning or Torah observance in general as a burden. Once we can get over that hump, so then he says, you become an Ohev Hashem. It shouldn't be such a hard thing, but apparently it is for a lot of people. Finally, Nachmanides, based on the Midrash, teaches that suffering for Hashem will cause us to love Him. The question of why we suffer is not limited to tragedies of epic proportions. Although the Midrash focused primarily on those dying for Hashem, Nachmanides Ramban applies it to any form of suffering. Life is tough, and we go through much hardship. Rare is the moment when we find ourselves without some issue to struggle with. We may be willing to overlook our difficulties when we compare them to those of our friends or neighbors, whom we consider more unfortunate than us, but in truth, since the world was created for us and our pleasure, we should never suffer. If we do, we must try to figure out why Hashem is bringing it upon us. We must take an honest look at our lives and try to interpret the messages Hashem is sending. We must determine which areas in life He wants us to repair. We must make sure that we are not ignoring our suffering simply because we feel comfortable with our spiritual standing and don't want to exert ourselves to improve it. Suffering can therefore bring us closer to Hashem, but only if we crave that closeness. If we are afraid to come closer to Him because we think that it will make our life uncomfortable, we will not grow from suffering, we will resent it. But if we open our mind to the possibility of a happier, more meaningful life, we can begin to appreciate the challenges. Eventually, we will love Hashem for providing us with the motivation to help us grow. We began with the question of how the Torah can command us to feel an emotion. We learn from the Rishonim that love for Hashem, like any meaningful form of love, is one that comes from an appreciation of what He is and what He does for us. We can use nature, Torah, and even suffering to create a burning desire to come close to our Father in heaven. In the Tochacha, the admonishment in Parashah Tavo, the Torah lists a series of unspeakable catastrophes that will befall our nation if we reject the Torah and Mitzvot. In the middle of the account, the Torah states that tragedies will strike because you did not serve Hashem your God amid gladness and goodness of heart when everything was abundant. A question is often raised on this verse. Nowhere in the Torah do we find a mitzvah to be happy. Even the mitzvah of Samachta b'chagecha, which commands us to be joyous on festivals, is interpreted technically, not emotionally. The Talmud derives from verses in Tehillim that meat and wine will make one happy, and that one is therefore required to partake of them on festivals. Nowhere in the Torah do we find a mitzvah to smile outwardly or even inwardly. How can we be punished for sin that we were never warned not to commit? By the way, for all the vegetarians out there, obviously if meat doesn't make you happy, you're not required to eat meat. It's just saying, like we were discussing this morning actually, that originally, I think you said it, right? That people didn't have so much meat. So, when you're eating meat, it would be a big thing. Normally people would have, if you think about it, by the way, even if I have a hamburger, okay, it's nothing like a steak. It's nothing like a steak. You get a steak, you say, for those people who are meat eaters. But that's really good. Or if you have, I don't know what you have to get your brother here for vegan. I don't know what would be a great vegan thing, compared to just, right?
A lot of food he eats is like healthy for running and stuff.
I'm saying, but what would he consider a really great, wow, I'm getting to eat this? What would he consider, a Shabbos meal, if you will, for vegan? It can't just be vegetables. Maybe it is, I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's
sandwich fixed, yeah.
My mom makes stir fry, so we have that.
Okay, so maybe that's what it is.
Maybe.
Stir fry.
Oh.
Stir fry with nice.
Right. So a similar question can be asked on the verse that states, Uviyom simchachem moadechem rashei chadshechem utkatem v'chadshotro, which means on the day of your gladness, of your festivals, of your new moons, you shall sound the trumpet. Sifri explains that the day of your gladness refers to Shabbat. We know that there is a mitzvah of oneg, engaging in pleasurable activity on Shabbat, but nowhere do we find a mention of a mitzvah to be happy on Shabbat. Why does the Torah refer to it as a day of gladness? So in order to answer this question, we must take a deeper look at the Rambam's explanation of Ahavat Hashem. The Rambam uses some unusual wording in beginning his definition of the mitzvah of Ahavat Hashem, stating that it's a glorious and awesome God. It is the mitzvah to love and fear Him. This glorious and awesome God refers back to the entire first chapter of Hilchot Yesodei Torah, in which the Rambam established exactly who it is that we believe in. In other words, Rambam is stating, remember that infinite God that you learned about, the one who created everything and is omniscient and omnipresent, you must love Him. You have already seen Rambam's teaching that examining nature and appreciating this wisdom with which Hashem created everything will lead us to love Hashem. But together with examining nature, Rambam suggests that we should also examine Ma'asav, Hashem's deeds. Which deeds is the Rambam referring to? It seems from the context that he is referring to creation. He suggests that studying the creatures that Hashem created is insufficient. We must try to understand why He created them. And the answer to that question will lead us to an intense love of Hashem. Hashem, the infinite God who lacks nothing, created finite existence to give it to us. All the beauty, all the wisdom, all the energy, everything we see is for us. Hashem wants us to enjoy the world. This realization should fill us with intense love for Hashem and make us want to draw close to Him. But there's a problem with this idea. If Hashem wants us to enjoy life, then why do we suffer so much? If we were to choose a lifestyle that we would describe as pleasurable, we would certainly do away with doctor visits, financial woes, to name just a few of the troubles that plague us. Is life really so wonderful? It is, but only if we are not lazy. Hashem could easily have us breeze through blissful lives without hardships, but He does not want us to be satisfied with the earthly pleasures He created for us in this world. He wants us to receive the ultimate pleasure, to bask in His presence, which we can do only if we develop an appreciation for spiritual pleasure. He gave us the Torah to guide us on how to enjoy this world in a manner that will perfect us so that we can enjoy the divine presence. But even this is not enough. As we learned in Yichud Hashem, Hashem also challenges us so that we can earn closeness to Him, so that we can enjoy it as reward and not as a gift. It turns out that every second we spend in this world, even the most painful ones, are for our benefit. And while it is easiest to love Hashem when we derive pleasure from this world, love for Him can carry us through the most difficult moments too. The Klausenberger Rebbe lost his wife and 11 children during the Holocaust. Yet the stories that are told of his actions during and after the Holocaust show how strong his faith and love of Hashem was. Once in a slave labor camp, he decided that he would not go to work on Simchat Torah, no matter what the consequences would be. When he was absent at roll call, the Nazis sent someone to the barracks to summon him. As punishment for his quote-unquote crime, and as a warning to fellow inmates, the Nazis forced him to hold on to a bed frame while several Nazis beat him mercilessly. When they were done, they sent all the prisoners to work, leaving the Rebbe in a bloody heap. The prisoners stumbled around about dejectedly that day, certain that they would find their beloved spiritual leader dead when they arrived back at the barracks. To their shock, they found the Rebbe standing up, holding onto the bed frame once again, and moving his feet. As they ran toward him, they noticed that his lips were moving. When they reached him, they realized that the Rebbe had been victorious in his battle with the Nazis. Not only had he survived their beating, but he was dancing and singing in celebration of Simchas Torah out of deep love for Hashem and the granting of the Torah. Ahavat Hashem is a mitzvah that can encourage us no matter how difficult life becomes. The most basic human instinct, the desire to live, is based on the knowledge that as long as we live, we have potential to come closer to Hashem and to overcome the challenges He sends our way. The mitzvah is therefore to develop a passionate love for existence, not for mere physical substance, but for the sort of existence we describe in the mitzvah of Emunah. And Ohev Hashem does not drag himself about complaining about his lot in life. He feels that it is great to be alive because he knows what he lives for. He appreciates the opportunity to take part in Hashem's system of growth and be rewarded for his efforts, even if it's painful at times. We wondered how one could be punished for serving Hashem with a lack of joy if the Torah never commanded us to serve Hashem joyfully. The answer is that the very question is based on mistaken logic. The entire purpose of Torah and Mitzvot is to bring us closer to Hashem. One who serves Hashem without joy and emotion achieves little by doing so, because he is not fulfilling the purpose for which he was created. Furthermore, once we have developed clarity in the purpose of our existence here on earth, we should naturally feel overjoyed when we are presented with opportunities to fulfill our mission. Would we prefer to be like those people who spend their lives chasing various forms of pleasure? Certainly. But we are fortunate enough to serve Hashem. We who are fortunate enough to serve Hashem should realize that we are among the privileged few and rejoice at the opportunity He has presented to us. We'll stop here.